You're watching Defense Matters with your host, Anthony Money Hernandez and John McKechnie.
Welcome back, DCUC members and system partners. Once again, we are pleased you could join us today for our second annual broadcast event featuring defense matters that affect all credit unions who serve military and veteran communities. From the Bigwig Media Studios in downtown Washington, D.C. Now, I know many of you are at home or at the office watching this broadcast. However, I'm still going to say, let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you've been reading our monthly alert newsletter, then you know DCUC has adapted and innovated these last 2 years. We continue to find better ways to communicate and interact with each of you, our valued members. Last year, we found this broadcast to be highly informative, breaking away from the tired Zoom format and allowing more of our members and partners to participate. I am happy that more of you can attend this event. We have lots to share in terms of current defense matters on Capitol Hill and inside the Pentagon. And when we are all on the same page, we can effectively and collectively advocate for our members, over 30 million strong, as we serve those who serve our country. Before we get started, it is important to recognize why we are all here and take a moment to recognize the brave men and women in our military that serve our great nation. They defend us and are called upon to make countless sacrifices so that we can live freely. To them, their families, and all our veterans, I say thank you. I also want to say thanks to a few people and organizations. First, our DCUC Board of Directors. Our chairman, Bill Burney, President and CEO of Front Wave Credit Union. First Vice Chairman, Jack Fallis, President and CEO of Global Credit Union. Second Vice Chairman, Maggie Sayer, President and CEO of Keys Federal Credit Union. Board Secretary, Denise Floyd, President and CEO of Fort Sill Federal Credit Union. Board Treasurer, Frank Paddock, President and CEO of Scott Credit Union. Ron Aoki, President and CEO of Schofield Federal Credit Union, and Ryan Ross, President and CEO of Air Force Federal Credit Union. I also want to thank our sponsors for today's broadcast. These are stalwart supporters of your Defense Council, and we could not do what we do without their support. The Armed Forces Financial Network. The Armed Forces Financial Network was the only EFT network that provided access to the U.S. military, veteran, and civilian communities with ready access to their funds through ATM and point-of-sales terminals located at or near U.S. military bases worldwide, especially when no one else would do it back in 1985. And for more than 36 years, AFFN continues to be the most loyal partner for our member credit unions, giving back to the community through a matching grant program and with no-fee prepaid debit cards for wounded warriors and their families at Fisher houses and at DoD Warrior Games. Nobody else does that. I also want to thank ALM First Financial Advisors. ALM First was founded in 1995 with a focus on financial advisory services for credit union clients. Through a strong dedication to service and risk management, ALM First has grown its client base beyond credit unions and has developed lasting relationships with hundreds of financial institution clients. And as ALM continues to grow, one thing remains the same: their strong commitment to ensuring their clients meet and exceed their financial goals. And Omni Commander. Omni Commander is a veteran-owned business well known for building mobile responsive, ADA-compliant websites with industry-specific search engine optimization. OmniCommander won the Credit Union National Association's Diamond Award due to the gorgeous imagery, amazing user interface, and sleek design of their credit union websites. Go to omnicommander.com for more information and to view their award-winning work. Also, be sure to check out what they are doing with Cyber Commander by attending our DCUC member brunch this Sunday, February 27th at 9 a.m. at the Marriott Marquis in downtown Washington, D.C. We will hear from Lieutenant Colonel Roy Ross, United States Army retired, who is an expert in cyber operations. And so we want to say many thanks to each of our sponsors. Here's a look at our agenda. We have lots to discuss today, including some brief comments from Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota and a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Senate Committee on Veteran Affairs, and the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, all three crucial to what we do in support of our military. Plus, we have some extended remarks from the Honorable Kyle Hauptman, Vice Chairman of the National Credit Union Administration and DCUC's primary contact inside the agency. We will have that interview for you shortly. Lots of great answers and questions you won't want to miss. Once again, my partner for today is John McKechnie, Senior Partner at Total Spectrum. And as you know, John's work on the Hill and at the agency is valuable to what we do in terms of our advocacy efforts. Many of you know John and have worked with him before, and I'd like to say, John, welcome back to the DCUC stage.
Thank you very much. Always great to be with you. It's a lot of fun to go through these issues every year, but also I hope it's informative for our audience. There's an awful lot to talk about, as usual.
Well, John, again, thanks for being here, and let's get into our show.
Good.
I would like to introduce a good friend of DCUC. Senator Kevin Cramer was elected to the United States Senate on November 6, 2018, after serving 3 terms as North Dakota's at-large member of the United States House of Representatives. He is the first Republican to hold this Senate seat in his lifetime. Senator Cramer serves on the Armed Services, Veterans Affairs, Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and Budget Committees. And while a member of the House, Senator Cramer made constituent outreach a top priority, describing interacting with the public as the best part of public service. And according to Legistorm, the Capitol Hill Government Issues website, Senator Cramer held more town halls than any other member during several of his years in the House. Senator Cramer is a strong advocate of the free market system and has a proven record of cutting and balancing budgets, along with encouraging the private sector through limited, common sense regulations and limited government. I first met Senator Cramer when I was a colonel in the United States Air Force during my command tour at Grand Forks Air Force Base, North Dakota. So I am delighted that he could join us today. Senator Cramer, welcome to the DCUC stage, sir, and you have the floor.
Hey, I'm Kevin Cramer. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you today at the Defense Matters Forum, because defense really matters. You know, at the Defense Credit Union Council, you serve those, of course, who serve our country. Your members fight for a better country and a better tomorrow, and it's a very noble cause. And you aim, of course, to equip your members with the best and most current information to address issues regarding the financial well-being of service members, their families, and of course our veterans. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you do. You know, as a senator from North Dakota and a member of the Senate Banking Committee and a member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, I seek to do the very same thing for North Dakotans, for veterans, and frankly, for all Americans. You know, I'm constantly looking for opportunities across the federal government to not add, but to remove bureaucratic obstacles, and of course to streamline the burdensome regulations. Looking in the space in which you operate, of course, I've long been fighting the efforts of others to impose regulatory compliance burdens on defense credit unions as if they were a bank. I opposed legislation that sought to do just that, and I'll continue to do so. There's no need to make it any more difficult for you to do your job so that your members can realize their dreams, buy their first house, save for retirement. Of course, the list of major milestones and financial well-being goes on and on. Another area of great interest to me is the recent efforts from the United States Postal Service to provide banking services. So in November, I joined colleagues on a letter to Postmaster General DeJoy denouncing the Postal Service's misguided attempt to federalize financial services. Not only would it be a terrible shift in their mission and attention and resources, but the agency inherently lacks the expertise in financial products and offerings. Furthermore, any expansion into consumer financial services raises the troubling possibility of government-run banking in the future, and none of us are for that. So as things pop up in the defense credit space, please don't hesitate to reach out if I or anybody in my office can be of assistance. And I hope you enjoy the conference. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a quick shout out to the 3 defense credit unions in my state of North Dakota. Minot Air Base's North Star Community Credit Union, the Grand Forks Air Force Base's Service Credit Union, and of course, Freedom Community Credit Union. Thank you for your hard work in our state, and keep it up. God bless you. Take care.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. We really appreciate you taking the time to send your greetings to our audience. And I remember working with you when I was in command at Grand Forks Air Force Base and delivering the groundbreaking Enhanced Lease Use Initiative for the state of North Dakota and our military. You were a class act then and now, and we are truly thankful for your time and for your service to our great nation. Earlier, I had the opportunity to sit down with our next speaker for a discussion on regulatory matters affecting our industry, along with some questions on the agency's 2022 supervisory priorities. The Honorable Kyle S. Hauptman was nominated to serve on the NCUA board on June 15, 2020. The United States Senate confirmed him on December 2, 2020, and he was sworn in as a member of the NCUA board on December 14, 2020. The NCUA board approved his designation as vice chairman of the NCUA on December 18, 2020. Prior to joining the NCUA board, Mr. Hauptman served as Senator Tom Cotton's advisor on economic policy, as well as the staff director of the Senate Banking Committee's Subcommittee on Economic Policy. Previously, Mr. Hauptman was a senior vice president at Jeffries & Company. He worked at Lehman Brothers as a bond trader in New York City, as well as in their international offices in Tokyo and Sydney, and served as a voting member of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission's Advisory Committee on Small and Emerging Companies. This is his second appearance at a DCUC event. And if you remember from our annual conference in Florida last August, Vice Chairman Hauptman highlighted what he saw as early warning lights for our credit unions as we continue to struggle in recovering from the pandemic's effects. We also discussed arbitrary interest rate caps and the adverse effects on financial inclusion. I highly value the Vice Chairman's support, and I consider him a great friend of DCUC. Thank you for being here, Mr. Vice Chairman. Once again, we're very happy you are here and for your support of the Defense Credit Union Council. I appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to join us in the studio as we broadcast to more of our members who are unable to make the trip to Washington, D.C. next week. Plus, we believe it is important that you are here in person and willing to speak directly to our members, which is the essence of good government: open, transparent, and responsive. So before we get started, are there any words you have for our audience?
Sure. Well, first of all, I appreciate the invite. You don't have to thank me for coming. First, we've done this once before, and you were a pretty good interview, so I wasn't afraid to come back to do this again. DCUC is obviously a great group. They do very important work. If you'd like, I can talk about my priorities.
Sure.
Is that what you want me to get into?
Absolutely.
Okay. The 3 things I started with, and I'm now 14 months in, still have yet to have an in-person board meeting. That's how it is. Number 1, my main thing is I don't want to be responsible in any way if credit unions like traditional banks, slowly go the way of Blockbuster Video because their regulator wouldn't let them innovate. What we mean is, if you're losing market share or mind share to new fintech firms, what is it you need from NCUA to do those things instead of being outcompeted? So crypto and blockchain is very important. We want to make sure that people can do what they think is best to serve their members and not watch outflows of capital and easier services happen to other places, not credit unions, right? Want to make sure they can innovate. So crypto, blockchain, and then the broader fintech, that's priority one. Priority two is looking at the de novo process, which ties into why is it so difficult to start a credit union, and is it so hard to be a small one? Because the new ones are almost always small. So we're kind of dealing with both issues. It's not that we think, that I think, that NCUA should determine how many new credit unions there are or how many there are in total. But the American people should determine if they want to have a new financial services provider in their field of membership, they should be able to do it without an undue burden at NCUA. So we've revamped that process. And the last thing is what I would say is customer service from NCUA to your credit unions. Just modernization, all the things we normally deal with. I live in DC, it's not nobody's model of good governance, my local government. But when I call a department, it's, this call is monitored for quality assurance. So we've now put in a supervisory letter that something that was always there, but recording your exit exams, just so everybody is clear of what was there. That was always available. It's easier than ever during COVID times, because if you're using Zoom or one of these programs, you just hit record, everybody sees it. And when you're done, you get an email and you can send it to NCUA or anybody else, right? And if I was a new credit union CEO or a new examiner, I would love to be able to see or hear the last exam. Right. And it's just basic customer service. We're on hold all the time, whether it's Verizon, this call is monitored for quality assurance. So the customer service thing I'm talking about right now has two elements. Number one is encouraging recording. Credit unions out there, please, reference me, reference the letter. Say, hey, I'd like to record this for everybody's benefit, just for clarity. Just a very useful tool. And then also we have a pilot going on of a quick 5-question exam after credit union exams for NCUA, the examiner, and for the credit union. If you ever take Uber or Lyft,
feedback.
How was, it's right away. How was it, right? And it's not just that you find out right away if there's an issue, it's you communicate your priorities, right? For Uber and Lyft, was the car clean, and as a result, there's probably fewer McDonald's wrappers in Uber and Lyft than there are in old school taxis. It's not because of the human beings, it's because of the accountability right away. And we're going to communicate things like, was everything put in writing that you have to do going forward, right? Sure. We don't think we're going to catch a big disagreements necessarily, but it does communicate to everybody in the room that as soon as it's over, you're going to do this quick survey, right? And of course, the last question will be, what other questions should be on the exam? Because things change over time. There were certain COVID-related questions that hopefully will not matter. So anyway, those are the three. Sorry.
Would the results of that survey, would that be public or aggregated?
The aggregate possibly. Right now, we always had an ombudsman, right?
Right.
And like a lot of government agencies, we're basically a monopoly provider of services, and that's the core issue. There's nothing to do with the good people at NCUA or any other agency. And monopolies produce mediocre products at high prices, right? Public, private, anywhere in the world. So we're trying to bring in things that already exist that NCUA employees and credit union employees already deal with. You can't get to the parking lot after checking out of a hotel without, how was your stay at the Marriott? And they want it right away. So it's going to go to the ombudsman to start. I think we may be able to, this is a pilot program, we'll see how it goes, publish the aggregates, okay? And there may even also be a place in this world for what FDIC does, an anonymous one.
Sure, yeah.
Sometimes you want to say something but not get involved. But the main thing we want to do is normalize this so you're not the narc. You're not the, can I speak to the manager? Right. That it's normal. Everyone does it, Sure. You get better results and it removes the stigma. No credit union should feel weird about it. Like you can't, because everybody's supposed to do it eventually, right? And it's part of the process. You can't even order an Uber and Lyft until you rate the last one. They won't let you. Same with you use DoorDash or any of the delivery services. They've gotten rid of that, problem of some people complain and some people don't say anything, you know? And everybody knows it, and it's not, hey, why did you comment on me? No, everyone does it after every exam,
Yeah, it's part of the process.
So all I would say to all this is just modernization. Nothing that the rest of us aren't used to in the rest of our lives.
That sounds neat. I mean, I'd be interested to see what what the feedback is.
One of the reasons I took this job was being on Capitol Hill and hearing from institutions about their regulator, not just financial regulators, but anything. But they didn't want you to say their name. You say, well, what was the name of your examiner or whatever? And they don't want to say anything. I could probably find out if I wanted to. But and then you tell the regulator, hey, this is a problem. Like, okay, where? With who? Well, I can't tell you. And then nothing happens, right? You can eliminate a lot of these problems up front by just having the normal customer service things that I think people deserve, that credit unions deserve, that NCUA deserves. If I was a new examiner, I would love to know the backstory on something.
Yeah,
you know?
that's helpful.
And that survey tells me what the priorities are, because those 5 questions are not picked at random. You know, Uber and Lyft didn't pick. They both put the top 2: cleanliness and navigation. Right. Like how did they take you out of the way? You know, they picked those the top 2, and everybody knows it wasn't an accident. They picked those. And as a passenger, I know that my cleanliness. You know, I don't want to trash your car.
Right.
That solves a lot of the problems right away. But anyway, none of this is new to any normal consumer in most of the world. So
well, that's neat that it's coming to credit union. I guess my next question is: now that you've been on the board for over a year, what are your top concerns for our industry?
Well, I'd say there's a short-term one and then a longer-term one. The short-term one is we're 2 years into COVID now. You know, it was the middle of March when everything sort of fell apart, and walking into the studio today, in February of 2022, I had to have a mask, and there's a vax mandate still right now. Right. I did not expect that, okay, that it would be that long. So the immediate fallout wasn't that bad, even though we lost 21 million jobs, right? Right or wrong, there was a flood of money from the government, stimulus checks, the refinancing because we had low interest rates. There were a number of things, a high unemployment benefit, so a flood of money, so the delinquencies aren't there right now. But the longer this goes, there has to be something. You know, when the tide goes out, what's there? Mm-hmm. Chairman Harper definitely feels, he's very public about it, that we're going to have a downturn, and there needs to be a insurance premium increase because we'll have delinquencies on car payments and on mortgages. So that's the short-term one is, when do we go back to normal for real? Right. Across all 50 states, because some places have got all their jobs back and some haven't. So that's the short term. What will be the economic fallout from COVID when it finally ends, right. And it's been longer. The longer term concern is what I said before about making sure they can compete in the manner they want to. That traditional finance like credit unions, checking accounts, ATM machines, that it's not because of NCUA they go the way of travel agents and video rental stores. That we allow them to compete in the manner that they know best.
That's good. That's always a concern. I mean, what happens the day after? Let's discuss charitable donation accounts. The NCUA forbids donations to groups that are not 501c3 organizations when they use their CDA funds. And specifically, the NCUA Regulation 721.3, which discusses charitable donation accounts. Yet most of the veteran organizations are 501c19 organizations, which are tax-exempt organizations that specifically benefit veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces. And that means that the work of 501c19 nonprofit organizations, are sort of left out. And these are organizations that focus solely on making life better for veterans or the current members of our nation's armed forces. And so, I guess our concern, we're hearing from our member credit unions, is that these veteran organizations are concentrated in areas where our member credit unions serve. Is it possible for us to change this regulation?
All right, so I just got the backstory on all this to get ready for this interview, because I'll admit it wasn't something I knew backwards and forwards before you mentioned, in our preparation for this. Here's the deal. NCUA doesn't forbid any donation from any credit union to any of these 501c19 veterans groups, okay? A few years back, I think it was like 12, 15 years ago, they allowed a thing called charitable donation accounts. This is just a new tool that does not remove any options. What they are, just like an individual or a company has a donor advised fund, I have one with my broker. You put the money in, you get a tax deduction same year, and you can then invest it in various things. Obviously, the tax deduction doesn't really matter for credit unions, but your CDA is just one more tool. It gives you one benefit. You can invest the money in things you can't do that a credit union normally couldn't do. Right? You can buy the S&P 500 index fund. right? You can buy, various stock funds. That's the one benefit of CDA, and that comes with one restriction, which is the type of organizations that they give to are the most basic definition of charity, which is 501c3.
Gotcha. Right.
There are, as you know, 30-something, the veteran ones are called C19,
right,
and they go up. My donor advised fund I have in my brokerage has the same thing. They pick 501c3 because it's kind of the easy way out to say just charity. Some of the others are kind of political and they can run ads. But anyway, the point is, if I was a credit union, I ran into this problem. I want to give to this military group, but my CDA won't let me. What I would do is, going forward, maybe not put all of your money you want to give away into your CDA. Do 80-20 or something like that. Because you can still use your regular money, and CDAs didn't even exist 15 years ago. So we wouldn't have even had this conversation before. So Does that make sense?
That does.
It just added one new option. A charitable donation account has one benefit and one restriction,
So there's no opportunity to change
What is
that?
right? It would be hard. If your main thing is, I would like these groups to get money, I would tell people, hey, if you'd like to give to us for next year, put some of your money in your CDA and put a piece off to the side, right? So you don't run into this problem where all of our charitable money is stuck in the CDA. We can't,
Right.
And again, this option didn't even exist that long ago. It's just one more option. As you know, do I think there's anything wrong with giving to these groups from a CDA? No. It's just, given how many types of nonprofits there are,
right?
It's a little bit like you got 10 kids and you give one a cookie. It's hard to do to change, but there are ways around this.
Okay, we'll get that out to our members as well. I know the NCUA is looking at succession planning, right? And this is a relatively new issue for credit unions, at least from a regulatory standpoint. And yet I'm already hearing that it's an important one. Can you outline the concern and describe what the NCUA is looking for in terms of having a documented plan?
Sure. Well, just to be clear, we just put out a proposed rule. I and my staff made sure that there was a whole bunch of questions on there that were very pointed, okay? Because the backstory here is, everyone agrees that there is an issue. A lot of mergers happen because there wasn't succession planning. So-and-so retires, or something happens, they have a heart attack, whatever. They take another job someplace else and nobody wants to step up, and there's somebody out there with a merger offer, and that's the path of least resistance. Nothing wrong with a lot of these mergers, but succession planning can cause problems. The one Chairman Harper mentions is one out in the Pacific Northwest, and it was just for loggers, and it was very specialized, right? The way a lot of credit unions are, very specialized. They're the only one that does what they do. And something happened, and they had no CEO or chairman, they didn't have succession plan, and then there's no longer a specialized logger credit union, right? So it is an issue. The question is whether or not NCUA's involvement therefore makes it better. And we made a point of having those questions to say, our career staff says, and it may be right, most people have a succession plan, so this rule shouldn't be a problem. So, okay, hold on. What exactly does that mean? So, will you open Microsoft Word at all? Will you type a thing called successionplan.doc? Because you may have a plan, right? Sure. The board has already voted that if, Chairman Tony and CEO Kyle get hit by a bus, we're going to do this, but you don't necessarily have a thing to hand your examiner,
Right.
So what exactly is the amount of work for those who do, and what will truly be the benefit of the rule for those who don't, So former Chairman Hood, he voted against the proposed rule. Chairman Harper is the one who proposed it. I voted for it, but I kind of agree with both of them. There is an issue, but as Rodney Hood says, we're trying to see what exactly a rule will do, and will it actually be no problem at all for those that don't have succession plan problems,
Sure. So we'll see as we
anybody listen to this, please respond to the AMPR. The easiest thing is, hey, I think we're set. If I have an exam and I do this, say these words, give this copy and paste, will that be sufficient? That's what I would do if I was a credit union. I wouldn't ask a general question. I would say, is this right here sufficient?
That's helpful. The NCUA recently published its 2022 supervisor priorities. We're hearing that balance sheets will be more closely scrutinized than usual for risk management, as well as concentrations because of economic fragility. Again, can you expand on the trends that are causing this concern? And then how does rising inflation or supply chain issues or consumer confidence drive economic fragility?
I think they're all kind of the same answer, which is that we're coming out of, knock wood, a pandemic. The stimulus efforts, both fiscal and monetary, may be wearing off. Once the tide goes out on this whole, effort to fight the pandemic and the economic effects, what does it actually look like? And like I said, geographically in this country, there's big differences in economic performance, right? Some places, right or wrong, had bigger lockdowns and they have 70% of their jobs. Some places have exceeded the number of pre-pandemic jobs. So, and there may be industries that are harder hit, right? I think we agree that when we go back to normal, it's not going to be exactly the same, right? Mm-hmm. This forced experiment we've all had with work from home, if you were blessed to be in the Zoom class of workers, it's going to be a little different, So how does that affect various things? The travel industry, the cruise ship industry, well, for credit unions, probably a better example would be theme parks. Do they take a while? People who work in entertainment. So the credit union system lends itself to concentrations. To be honest, I don't think it's that big a difference than normal. We always care about balance sheet. Sure. But because of the inflation, because that means rates will rise, because that can hurt consumer confidence because they're being hit by a convention, does that mean we're on the front end of a slowdown or something? And obviously it's when there's an economic slowdown that we find out
what's there.
What's there, right, yeah.
Makes sense. We're also hearing that cybersecurity issues could consume a large, part of the examiner time in 2022. Any comments on that?
Yeah, definitely a priority. I'll say this, that in our initial back and forth email, somebody had given you the number, they hear it could take up to 50% of the exam time will be cybersecurity. Just so you know, I copy and pasted that, and the reaction from everybody at NCUA was, whoa, 50% seems really high, So maybe there's some credit union out there that we 50%, but just so people know, the suggestion that it might be up to half was met with wow, that seems really crazy. There is a tool I think that's quite useful that other financial regulators use. NCUA published it. It's a cybersecurity assessment tool. It's free. It's for the use of credit unions. They can use it on their own or not use it. I will recommend using it because you'll at least see, in a way, the way NCUA is looking at these things. They kind of look at it as how risky is the credit union? Like the smaller it is and the fewer things it does, its risk profile is just low in general. So it has to do less stuff for cybersecurity. But your larger ones obviously may have a higher risk and have to do more. But I would recommend people do that tool and know that it's not supposed to be up to half of the exams.
That's very helpful. I also understand that compliance with new risk-based capital, the regulation is also going to be closely monitored, particularly in the first half of the new year, and that this data will be collected on the 5,300s that are beginning with the March report. What can we expect as a result of that?
Yeah, so that was something of an awkward issue in general because the way Congress wrote it, we had to have a rule comparable to the other banking regulators. They had their rule already done. Ours couldn't be that different.
Right.
Had to be comparable, whatever that means. So we also passed the cooler, the simplified one. It is the expectation that most people, most credit unions, will not have to actually focus and calculate in a risk-based capital because they will meet the simplified capital ratio. The objection I raised when it came up is, wait a second, what happened to 7% being well capitalized? Because for the credit unions that risk-based capital applies to, right? Mm-hmm. For the ones of a certain size and up. It is true that, I don't particularly like this, but 7% has kind of stopped being the holy grail. If you now have to either have a risk-based capital score of something or get out of risk-based capital with, your simplified leverage ratio, we call it cooler.
Right.
But again, hopefully the cooler is sufficient to make sure that people don't have to worry about risk-based capital. And we should, like all these new rules, be understanding, I'll say, of people doing anything for the first time.
Sure, yeah, you never know what the reaction is going to be on the other side. We're hearing a lot about fintechs, and they're increasingly in the news. And a while back, the OCC granted a full banking charter to SoFi, a lending fintech. And so basically, the OCC, said to SoFi, you can become a bank holding company and take full advantage of a national bank charter, meaning deposit insurance, various powers and authorities. And this seems like an unmistakable sign that the financial marketplace is going to have a new and different kind of competitor than the traditional brick and mortar financial institutions, credit unions included. And so what is the NCUA's plan for this brave new world? And are we going to see a fintech credit union in the future?
It's an interesting question, but the expression, predictions are difficult, especially about the future. What we do know is that the future will be different.
Right.
25 years ago, you didn't have mobile banking, internet, but technology has affected credit unions. They've always been innovators. It will affect them in the future. What I would say is when we had our crypto blockchain RFI last summer, I think of that as a broader sense. It's all new technology, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, instead of having an Uber versus taxi argument, hotel versus Airbnb, say, credit union, is there something out there that a new fintech is doing that you think would be good for you to do, okay? What is that thing, and what do you need from NCUA to do it? Do you need guidance? It doesn't mean we're going to allow everything.
Right.
But we don't want NCUA to be an excuse to not do profitable, viable activities and instead complain about the new guy, because that never works in the long run,
Sure, because that's product of evolution, right?
I've already seen it where credit unions didn't do something that didn't break any rules at NCUA. This was a partnership with a crypto trading platform. Didn't break any rules, which is why we didn't have to put out a rule to specifically allow it. But most credit unions said, no, I don't think my regulator will allow that. I don't think they'll like that. Didn't break a single rule. That's what we want to get rid of. And I think that issue right there, where you don't know what your regulator is going to say, what's the point of following rules if there's apparently a whole bunch of other ones that aren't written, right?
Right, and the absence of guidance, right?
Right, yeah. So that's where you ask people, okay, do you need a sentence or a letter that says, yes, you can do this thing in this manner with some caveats that our lawyers will put in there, But fighting new technology, provided the new business model is valid, it's sustainable, it's profitable, trying to get these people not to be able to do that is a failing strategy, right? Mm-hmm. Credit unions want to innovate, they can. And we at NCUA have to know that new ideas, some of them work, some of them don't, some of them before their time, and allow that experimentation. Because if we don't, we're going to be standing by while the industry sort of slowly loses young people, loses mind share, loses wallet share.
Be selling buggy whips in an age of automobiles, right? Okay, so finally, overdraft protection programs. We understand those will receive some special attention per the chairman's directive. What sort of things are in and out of bounds with respect to ODP?
Well, what I don't want to do, given our conversation just now, is come up and suggest any restriction that isn't on what is written in our rules.
Sure.
Because what is the point of writing all those rules if following them doesn't get you in the clear, Mm-hmm. We do know that for whatever reason, I think fairly obvious reasons, it's become a political football, the same with short-term, high interest loans. It's income that people look poorly upon in some circles, I always wonder, okay, why don't you lend them the money out of your own pocket, whoever's looking poorly upon it, No, I'm dead serious. Like, if you think it's a good business and you can do it at a lower price, it's America. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
But what I will say is it's a reason also to find non-controversial, less controversial ways of making money. The guidance we put out about partnerships with with crypto trading firms. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's the right idea. I don't know which partner to use, but the point is they can experiment with it, and it's a stream of non-interest income, okay? Mm-hmm. If someone is getting heat on overdraft or on short-term loans, payday loans, one way to deal with that is to find other sources of income that don't give you a hard time. And that is where I think a regulator comes in to allow that sort of experimentation,
That's great. Yeah, that, kind of let folks figure out what the marketplace decides. And, we're in the business of not hurting people, so with those principles in mind. Well, sir, I got to say, you've answered all these questions very well, and I can't thank you enough for being here with us today. Are there any rallying thoughts or words of encouragement, challenges that you'd like to make to our audience?
Just to be proactive and communicate. I am very easy to get a hold of. Whoever's the chairman has this unbelievably packed calendar. Turns down 2 speaking engagements a week. As the 2 board members, I want to listen to people, and the most enjoyable thing I've done so far is get my staff, our career staff, and credit union folks, whether it's leagues, all on a Zoom call to talk about these things, so we hear directly. Mm-hmm. So that AMPR and succession planning,
right.
Be direct and communicate. If you want, call me and say, is this going to, can I write this?
Yeah.
And just be as specific as possible, because so often, we're here at headquarters in D.C., Alexandria. We have the regions and supervisors, and sometimes, your folks will know that the rules of engagement set by the generals aren't always what gets filtered to the battlefield.
Sure. Right.
Like anything in life,
Communication.
it's a game of telephone, right? And people have different incentive structures, So, reach out and say, this is something we'd like to do. Or have your league do it if you're afraid of, putting your head above the tree line,
Sure.
And just communicate point blank. I can say that at least I am super open to these things and want to hear very directly. So, email, send ideas. Again, if you don't want to do it directly and have your name on it, I think it's a shame that you might feel that way, but if that's how it is, send it to Tony and have him say, one of our guys are looking at this new business model. It could produce some income. We think it's a good idea. What if we did this exact thing? And that will really help us, because I can tell you for a fact that the regulator does not realize the power that a sentence or a few sentences can have. Government's kind of like Bam Bam. It doesn't know its own strength.
Right.
Everything lands in a big way, what it says and what it doesn't say. So sometimes you need to hear, you are allowed to do this exact thing.
Right.
And we need to hear that. That's all I want to leave you with.
Well, again, I really enjoy our discussion, sir, and the support you give, not only to DCUC, but our members at large. And so, I just want to thank you again for being here. And what I want to tell our members, those that are watching, is that you can catch Vice Chairman Hauptman at our DCUC annual conference later on this August, August 2nd through 5th in San Antonio. And I know last year the Vice Chairman met individually with many of you out there, which is a rare opportunity for direct dialogue, which is important for building trust and understanding on matters of importance. And so I hope those of you watching will join us in August. Again, many thanks, sir, for your support, and thank you for being here.
Anytime.
That was great. John, what do you see happening at the NCUA, as we head further into 2022?
Well, I think, honestly, a lot of, like every institution in the country is trying to regain sort of a sense of normalcy after the pandemic and everything that all the havoc that wreaked. I think in the case of NCUA, the supervisory committees that we've talked about, they're trying to get back into a sense of regulating credit unions the way things were, even despite some of the pressures like inflation and things like that. I think, for instance, I'd say NCUA is looking more at risk concentration. I think they're looking at different kind of risks that are posed by climate. You've seen recently NCUA's put forth a proposed rule on succession planning, which is really a way to address some of the mergers that are going on in the credit union system. So, it's going to be a welcome change to get back to a more open way of doing business. I actually hope that we can set foot in the agency sometime this year. I know that sounds ambitious, but I enjoy going to board meetings and watching the proceedings in person. I don't know what the plans are for that. I don't know what the plans are for in-person examinations. But again, we're heading back to a more normal way of doing business, and NCUA reflects that.
Yeah, sort of rolling with the punches and then going with the flow.
Yeah, and the board is, I think this board is becoming used to each other. I think they're beginning to work and collaborate in a way that is positive for everybody. So, I think good days are ahead.
Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate the inside knowledge. DCUC will continue to keep you informed via our DCUC email message channel. Please let us know if you are not getting these important updates. You can subscribe to these emails via the address at the bottom of the screen. a word from our sponsor.
Credit unions need support and expertise to navigate today's challenges. From compressed margins and rising benefits expense to uncertain markets and mounting regulatory requirements, trust ALM First to provide strategies and solutions tailored to your institution. With over 25 years of service as a fee-based, SEC-registered investment advisor and balance sheet consultant, our size and scale deliver you expanded loan and investment opportunities and world-class analytics and on-demand tools to strengthen your financial performance. While you focus on serving your membership and community, let ALM First guide your institution to a stronger, successful future.
Thank you, ALM First Advisors. Make sure you visit www.almfirst.com to see more of what they offer, and I highly encourage you to attend one of their events. You will not be disappointed. DCUC's advocacy strategy for 2022 is focused on getting legislation introduced in the 117th Congress and taking the lead on veteran initiatives that are already being considered. We plan on taking a proactive approach on lots of legislation and regulatory changes in 2022, while maintaining an active posture on many congressional and federal government initiatives, which are also listed on the chart. Of course, this all depends on Congress working across the aisle to get things done. Here is the balance of power in both houses of Congress. As you know, while Democrats control both houses, it would not take much to swing votes on important issues. And you are all familiar with how the House leadership breaks down, and many of you already know how the House Committee on Financial Services, led by Chairwoman Representative Maxine Waters from California and Ranking Member Representative Patrick McHenry from North Carolina, along with the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, led by its chairman, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, and Ranking Member Senator Patrick Toomey from Pennsylvania. However, since we are the Defense Credit Union Council, and as most of our members are military and veterans, we also work with the House Armed Services Committee and the subcommittees on personnel and readiness, plus the leadership and staff on the Senate Armed Services Committee. We also work with the House Committee on Veterans Affairs and the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. John, what's your impression 1 year in of the 117th Congress?
Well, I think the impression is that it is influenced very heavily by the overarching environment with COVID, and we're still again trying to get back to what you would call normal legislating. In addition to that, the overlay is the partisan divide. The two parties don't get along particularly well right now. There's a lot of division. It's difficult to achieve consensus. That's not to say that it's not possible to achieve it. It's just it takes a lot more work. And it also takes a lot more recognition of the fact that a lot of members of Congress right now are focused on other issues. The attention span is not there. One final factor, I think, candidly, is the elections. That's going to really color the way the legislative agenda unfolds for the rest of the year. We're now in the winter of 2022, but I'd say by the early part of the summer, it's going to be very difficult to get anything done without finding real ways to factor in the elections. It's a tough environment, but again, that's part of the challenge. That's what makes it fun.
Are there any lingering challenges and opportunities as we get back on track towards the midterm elections? Or really, how much can we accomplish before the end of the legislative calendar when they have to go back and campaign?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the things that we've always dealt with at DCUC is the reality that every year, regardless of elections, there's got to be a defense authorization bill. And that's something we always keep a very close eye on. And every year we have to work on that perennial issue involving the military lease on bases, which is something the bankers continue to be persistent about. and we're going to do the same things we always do, regardless of an election. And I think in that particular case, with that particular issue, defense is such generally a bipartisan priority. So we're able to get that done, and that bill is going to pass, as I said, regardless of whether you have an election or not. So I'm very interested in watching the way this year's defense authorization unfolds, but I think it's going to be essentially, at the end of the day, the same as it always is.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate that as well. Before we discuss our advocacy initiatives, I would like to thank DCUC's Military Advocacy Committee for all its work in continuing to help us explore, study, and craft legislative and regulatory positions that help our member credit unions and, more importantly, the 30 million members we serve each day. The DCUC Military Advocacy Committee meets once a quarter for about an hour. It's composed of CEOs, compliance officers, and general counsel staff members, along with a growing number of credit union leagues. I highly encourage each of our member credit unions to participate. Contact us at admin@dcuc.org and we can get you on the list. Send advanced materials and meeting invites. Our next meeting will be on April 8, 2022 at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Please join us. Let's discuss the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, which was just enacted. The House Armed Services Committee directed a non-binding report in language submitted by Representative Stephanie Bice from Oklahoma, which directs the Secretary of Defense to submit a report to the Committee of the Armed Services of the Senate and House of Representatives not later than July 1st, 2022 on the following. 1. The availability of financial services institutions on military installations. 2. The degree to which service members and other personnel that live or work on military installations have the ability to choose between different financial services providers, including banks and credit unions, on military installations. 3. Federal policies and regulations impacting access for financial services providers that seek to offer their services on military installations. And 4, a description of how the department calculates the in-kind value of services provided by financial institutions on military installations, and whether the in-kind value calculated for these services can be used to partially or fully satisfy the fair market value requirement for leasing non-excess property on military installations pursuant to the Military Leasing Act, in Section 2667 of Title 10 of the United States Code. DCUC does not necessarily oppose a study. In fact, we were successful in removing some of the language as it was being drafted. However, we remain concerned about banker narratives that could influence their report. These concerns were communicated to the House Armed Services Committee ahead of their vote. And that said, we will all need to foot stomp 2 points while the study is being conducted during our visits to Capitol Hill, in the media, and on base as early and as often as possible. First, DCUC has always maintained that no military member is deprived of access to financial services when banks choose to leave the installation. There is a defense credit union on each base, and there are also plenty of mobile banking alternatives, so we don't see any service members being deprived. Second, DCUC has always maintained that banks can and should use a regulatory process for obtaining in-kind consideration pursuant to Section 2667 in Title 10. Now, this is a negotiation between the bank and the installation, and the fact that banks are unwilling to open negotiations is very telling. However, we can be assured the bank lobby will try to shape the outcome of the report and once again clamor for equal treatment on the installation, just as they have each year. So I want to encourage each of you to stay alert. Let your representatives know that banks and credit unions are not the same. We are not for profit and intrinsically tied to the communities we serve. Remember, stories help build our case. Plus, our success goes straight back to our member owners, not anonymous shareholders. John, what's your take on this report?
Well, the first thing that's obvious is that, once again, the bank lobby lost. They've tried for many years, almost a decade now, to get this lease provision into the National Defense Bill, and they've lost every time. Some years they've gotten it into one of the chamber's versions and only to have it stripped out in the end. This year, in 2021, they didn't even get that far. They didn't get either chamber bill to include their attempt to get on bases. What they did get, as you noted, was a study. And the study, to me, when it was first proposed, struck me as a solution in search of a problem. There's no evidence. I don't think anybody's really credibly said that there's evidence that there's a lack of access. I just think the banks wanted to try to get some study, just get anything in the bill. I don't know how the study is going to come out. I do think that it is important for us to raise our voices and make sure that people know the real deal when it comes to access for military members on bases. I'm confident credit unions are going to look good. But again, I would just wonder why go through the motions of this study that really didn't have any basis in reality. The real world didn't say we have a lack of access. The real world says credit unions are providing what consumers need, as usual.
Yeah, I haven't heard any instances of military members whining because they lost their bank.
No, and I do think you also made a good point about how the banks don't seem to be willing to do the hard work and the groundwork of trying to get on bases. There's a regulatory option for them. They just don't want to do it.
Right, I agree. So taking the report, that's due later on this summer, what can we expect heading into this summer with the 2023 NDAA?
Well, I have no reason to think that the banks are going to let up on their attempts to push their way into the bases. I suspect that they will try again to get the bill to say something about banks having access, and I think once again it's going to fail. But
you think they'll try to use a study as a launch point, or
that would be logical, because I think that they want to use the study to show some kind of problem. But again, I think that we at DCUC, as well as other credit union trades, have done a very good job of educating Congress about what the reality is, and I think that's why Congress has turned the banks down every year.
The fight continues. Right? There are some other items to watch for in the NDAA, and it's important to know about these since these will affect your members directly. Pay raises and benefits are always good changes to know about. And there are also 4 structure changes in terms of mission, hardware, and people. These affect the local economy, and it's good for credit union leaders to understand how the NDAA affects your community. And we are always on the lookout for any base realignments and closures, since balancing the budget is always a high priority. Budget changes are also necessary to afford any changes and pivots in response to Russian incursions into Ukraine, or North Korean missile tests, along with repeated attempts by China to assert regional dominance in the Western Pacific. DCUC will keep you informed on these changes via our articles in our monthly alert newsletter and in DCUC email messages, just like we have done in the past, whether it was information on financial readiness, food insecurity, or the NCUA's 2022 supervisory priorities. There are also DoD solicitation requests or other congressional items. And if you are not getting these messages, please let us know. Let's highlight legislation we fully support as part of our legislative strategy for 2022, along with some regulatory changes that would help America's credit unions better serve their members. Here are some bills and issues where we can be proactive in 2022. The first is Senate Bill 1838, Building Credit Access for Veterans Act of 2021. This bill requires the Department of Veteran Affairs to implement a pilot program to assess the feasibility and advisability of using alternative credit scoring information or models to improve the determination of creditworthiness of certain individuals and to increase the number of such individuals who can obtain VA housing and small business loans. Participation is voluntary and on an opt-in basis for lenders, borrowers, and individuals. DCUC supports this bill since it helps veterans who need additional assistance when transitioning from military service. John, what's your take on this bill?
I think veterans deserve a fairer shake from the credit reporting process, and this is a bill that's going to address that. And actually, this is a bill I would put some urgency around. Sooner the better. You know, veterans need, through no fault of their own, they don't have access to the traditional credit reporting sources. And this bill is a very smart, it should be a very easy way to fix that.
If you'd like to help out with this, we do have a sample letter that we can share with you all to send to your congressional delegation. Again, that we do this to our Military Advocacy Committee, and we'd appreciate your help. The second deals with charitable donation accounts. The NCUA forbids donations to groups that are not 501c3 organizations when using charitable donation accounts. Yet most veteran organizations are 501c19 organizations. Now, Section 501c19 refers to tax-exempt organizations that specifically benefit veterans of the United States Armed Forces. That means the work of 501c19 nonprofits must focus solely on making life better for veterans or current members of the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy, Space Force, and even our Coast Guard. Now, you all heard what the Vice Chairman said about changing the regulation. I am not giving up, nor should you. This will take a sustained advocacy campaign that will involve each defense credit union, league, and many powerful veteran service organizations, and maybe even Congress itself. Now, I've already started the campaign and contacted a number of these allies, and I can assure you there will be more to follow. I believe we should continue pushing for reintroduction of the Veteran Business Lending Exemption Act as an example of how all credit unions can take care of our veterans. DCUC supports legislation to amend the Federal Credit Union Act to exclude extensions of credit made to veterans and military members from the definition of a member business loan. This is where America's defense credit unions can help bridge the gap, especially as we continue to recover from the pandemic. Military members already trust their credit union with their hard-earned paychecks, so let's not send them away to a competitor when they need a business loan. John, can you give our audience a sense of where we're at on the Veteran Business Lending Exemption Bill?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to reiterate, this is a great bill. It really is something that we've worked on for several years. It continues to I think, make progress. We're trying to get it reintroduced in this Congress right now. Been working very well. Tony, you spearheaded some outreach to two U.S. senators, Senator Hirono from Hawaii and Senator Sullivan from Alaska. You worked with other trade associations. You worked with the leagues involved. I think we're getting close to having this reintroduced, and I think it's going to be a very positive thing to talk about. And you know, it's a matter of just trying to put credit unions in a position to do more to help consumers, and especially the veterans. It's been disappointing but not surprising to see the way the banking industry has tried to push back against efforts to help veterans, but you know, that's part of the game, I guess. I just think that that this year might be a year we can make some real progress on this.
Yeah, it's interesting, how they'll come out against veterans, and that ought to be something we ought to point out, in our media campaigns as well.
I agree. It is disappointing again, but it's not surprising.
Thanks, John. There are some other bills and issues that will affect your credit union, and we want to keep an eye on each of them in 2022. But first, a word from our sponsor. Thank you, Omni Commander. Again, check out www.omnicommander.com for examples of their award-winning work, along with all the other products and services they have to offer. I've seen their results and their work and know how they can help you succeed as well. Here are some bills and issues we want to keep an eye on in 2022. The first one we want to focus on is the Veterans and Consumers Fair Credit Act. DCUC does not support the bill as currently drafted, particularly since it includes the all-in rate, which can easily exceed the 36% threshold. Now, I get that the legislation is aimed at predatory lenders, and it should be. Just leave credit unions, including state chartered, out of it. John, what can you say about this bill?
It's an unfortunate example of the law of unintended consequences. There's a good intent behind doing something about predatory lending. Nobody would disagree with that. But the way this legislation would approach it, and it hasn't been introduced yet, but it's being rumored in both the Senate and the House. And it's something we need as a credit union movement to educate lawmakers as to why the 36% figure you cited, which sounds good on paper, but it's a lot more complicated than that, and it's going to actually have the effect of harming consumers by really restricting the access to credit. Let's hope this bill doesn't get introduced. I'm still hoping that maybe the potential sponsors can be talked out of it.
Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on it for sure.
Definitely.
I did want to, alert our audience to some late-breaking news that has to deal with, the Military Lending Act. That's kind of an outgrowth of the Veterans and Consumers Fair Credit Act. I understand DoD will be issuing a notice of proposed rulemaking on the MLA sometime this summer. This will reimpose the gap restrictions and other standalone products that factored into the purchase of a vehicle. Now, this is disappointing in that DoD does not seem to have learned or does not seem to even care about the harmful effect this will reimpose on our service members. We will keep our eyes on this and discuss an aggressive course of action at our next Military Advocacy Committee meeting. John, are there any other things we should be concerned about, with respect to things in front of the 117th Congress?
The one issue that I think is also potentially kind of a shark in the water would be a new effort on Capitol Hill to impose a rate cap on credit interchange. We all know about the debit interchange issue from a decade ago and how problematic that is. Unfortunately, there's a saying that no bad idea ever goes away completely in Washington, and I'm afraid that there are people on Capitol Hill, especially in the Senate, who seem to want to resurrect the idea of a cap on credit. And that's one of those potential bills. Hasn't been introduced yet. Certainly right now it's under construction. It's being drafted. There are drafts being circulated. I hope that we can dissuade senators from introducing something like that. But that is an issue that concerns me. If it emerges, if it's actually introduced as a bill, we're going to have to really work to fight that and educate. Everything we talk about is about educating members of Congress.
Sure.
And I also think we've alluded to this earlier. It's all about the members. And if we have to continually remind Congress of what we do for consumers, members, every day as an industry, and how that makes us different than anybody else.
Yeah, and that's a major point of our advocacy strategy is,
right.
Everything we do is on behalf of our service members and our veterans
right.
through our credit unions. And I think that enables us to keep the high ground when talking to Congress.
We're not simply talking about a brick and mortar institution. We're talking about consumers.
Real people, right, that have served our country
right.
and their families. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?
Well, the one issue that a lot of credit unions are talking about and should be talking about is overdraft protection, and how there's been a focus on that by the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They put out a pretty scathing report about the overdraft issue. In response to that, several banks and credit unions have started to either curtail or do away with overdraft. This isn't a legislative issue right now. It isn't really even a regulatory issue, although it's possible that CFPB does issue either a draft regulation or some kind of guidance. But what's happening is the marketplace is evolving in a direction that takes us away from overdraft.
Right.
Once again, this is an opportunity for credit unions to explain to Congress and to regulators and to the media, what's the real deal with overdraft? Is it really the negative that some people portray it to be? I would argue that credit unions have overdraft programs and administer them in a very responsible way. If there's consumer benefit, we should be able to step forward and emphasize that. And I think there is a case to be made that those kind of programs can be beneficial if people know what they're doing.
Absolutely. And I know there's been lots of discussions on both sides of this issue. Mm-hmm. And it is something that we will continue to discuss and elucidate further mm-hmm. on, especially with our military advocacy committee work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think, again, just to be clear, the regulators may in fact do a rule on this. They may just do guidance, or they may do nothing and sit back and let the market continue to evolve in the direction that it's going. But it's not a cut and dry issue. It's not black and white. And I hope we can take an opportunity to make that case.
Thanks, John. And I know there are lots of opinions on both sides of this issue. And this is something that we're going to have to continue to discuss in our military advocacy committee. And if there's anything else that you'd like to discuss that we didn't cover in this portion, please contact us. We'd be happy to give you our take on it, as well as a way ahead. And folks, that concludes the advocacy portion of our Defense Matters broadcast. The Defense Credit Union Council established the George E. Myers Scholarship Fund in 1996 in honor of Colonel George E. Myers, United States Army retired. Colonel Myers was an executive director of the council and selected to the first DCUC Hall of Honor. The fund's purpose is to provide scholarships for volunteers, management, and/or staff of DCUC member credit unions so they can further their professional credit union education, knowledge, and leadership skills. All active DCUC member credit union management, staff, and volunteers are eligible to apply. The scholarship can be used to attend both virtual and in-person industry conferences and professional development trainings at little or no cost to their credit union. And since 1997, DCUC has awarded 65 scholarships totaling over $190,000. And this year is no different. Here are the 2022 winners of the George E. Myers Scholarship, who will each receive a $3,500 scholarship. They are Steve Deere from RG Federal Credit Union, Aaron Force from Service Credit Union, Danny Landman from Fort Sill Federal Credit Union, and Alexandra Romju from Global Credit Union and a former DCUC crasher. Congratulations to all our winners, and thanks to everyone who supports our scholarship program by purchasing our annual White House Historical Association ornament sale each fall and for nominating great applicants each year. I hope each of you were able to get something from the information presented during the broadcast and in the digital package available online. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email or call me. We really want this to be an ongoing dialogue as we advocate for these priorities. Before we go, I want to encourage you to attend our annual conference this summer. The DCUC annual conference will be at the JW Marriott Hill Country Resort located near San Antonio, Texas. We have another great program already set, have confirmed more great speakers, and look forward to continuing our great tradition of bringing you the best, most informative, most useful programming possible. For more details, go to www.dcucannual.org and register. Did you know DCUC is a proud sponsor of Filene's Center for Emerging Technology? And once again, we are hosting an in-person event and will be partnering with Filene Research Institute to bring you more value for your travel dollar. So if you have never been to a DCUC conference or a Filene event, you won't want to miss us this summer. The filing research event starts on August 1st and will roll right into the DCUC conference, which starts on the 2nd. John, any last words before we sign off?
Well, I'm just very glad to be involved in this process, and we definitely need credit union people to start coming back to DC. Credit unions always do well when you're here, and I'd love to see all of you back here in DC, as well as at our conference later this year. Time to get back to work.
We will send you the link to this broadcast in the next couple days. Again, thank you for your support, and thank you for watching our presentation today. Once again, this is only possible thanks to our sponsors, the Armed Forces Financial Network, ALM First Advisors, and Omni Commander. And I hope to see you all at our member brunch at 9 a.m. this Sunday at the Marriott Marquis prior to CUNA's GAC, and that you have productive meetings with congressional leaders next week. We'll see you soon.
Credit unions need support and expertise to navigate today's challenges. From compressed margins and rising benefits expense to uncertain markets and mounting regulatory requirements, trust ALM First to provide strategies and solutions tailored to your institution. With over 25 years of service as a fee-based, SEC-registered investment advisor and balance sheet consultant, our size and scale deliver you expanded loan and investment opportunities and world-class analytics and on-demand tools to strengthen your financial performance. While you focus on serving your membership and community, let ALM First guide your institution to a stronger, successful future.
Since our nation's founding, freedom in America has been anything but free. From the world wars and Korea to Vietnam, from the Cold War to Iraq and Afghanistan, freedom is paid for in blood, in sweat, and in tears. Its currency is sacrifice. Our parents and grandparents, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, have left their families and their lives behind to fight for this country. They've shown the commitment and the courage to serve in the world's greatest military, and they've sacrificed their lives to protect ours, so that our children and grandchildren can live free and brave, with peace and prosperity in this country that we call home. Today we come together as brothers and sisters, united by freedom, bound by history, humbled by sacrifice, to say thank you.